Morning, folks. Bay State Yankee here. It's a rainy fall day, and I thought that I would take the time to make up a big batch of spaghetti sauce and can it. I like to do this in the fall, and then all winter we have it jar by jar as we need it. The recipe I use is one from my wife's family. Her mother notably made it, but before that her grandmother made it. So we kind of tweaked it only in the sense of making it thicker. I like it a lot thicker than her mother did. But we make it thicker, and then we put it in jars so that we have it, like I said, we have it all winter. But I had to give it a name. I couldn't just say the spaghetti sauce. So I call it your mother's spaghetti sauce. And this recipe is exactly the way that her family had it when they were growing up. So they all love it. I can it in pints, and there's just two of us here, so the two of us can easily go through a pint. We use it notably on spaghetti, but also on hot sausage grinders, which are really, really popular in the Northeast. Just simply fried onions and peppers, a few hot sausage links in there, maybe some cheese on top, slather a bunch of this sauce on there. Oh, it's to die for. So today I'm going to make a double batch of this, and then we're going to get it in jars and put it on the shelf. That should last us for the winter. So stick around, grab your coffee, and check this out. The recipe I'm using calls for 3 large cans of tomatoes. Now, I use the crushed tomatoes. My wife's mother used to use 1 can of whole tomatoes, which she would promptly crush. So it kind of didn't make a lot of sense. But in any case, we use 3 large cans of the tomato product. I use 1 small can of tomato paste for each recipe. And I use 1 small can of tomato sauce. Now, the original recipe called for 6 ounces of the paste and 6 ounces of the sauce, but regretfully today they're packaging this in 8 ounces, so a couple extra ounces really doesn't matter with this. The recipe calls for 1 green pepper and 1 red pepper. In the past I've used 2 green, 2 red. You know, that again doesn't really matter. You're going to want 2 onions. As you can see, I have 2 onions here for each batch. And then here comes the unusual part, the spices. We're going to put Worcestershire sauce in there. We're going to put a half a tablespoon of sugar in there. We're going to put, ready for this? Cinnamon, cloves, crushed red pepper, garlic salt. You're asking, I know right now, where's the oregano? And this recipe initiated prior to World War II. And back then, oregano was not sold everywhere in the States. So a lot of folks used whatever they happened to have. And cloves and cinnamon were real common. The crushed red peppers, you know, they were out there. And the garlic, of course. So that's what they used. And this recipe predates World War II. An interesting fact is that once World War II ended, I would say between 1947, 48-ish, and the early 50s, the sale of oregano in the United States jumped by 5,200%. Now that's a lot, but it was mainly because of the guys over there were fighting in the Italy region, and they were subjected to Italian foods, and you know, spaghetti sauce, pizza, all of these things had oregano on them. When they came back, they brought with them their love for oregano. Earlier than that, it was only sold probably in the, you know, when you had the big concentrations of Italian communities, they had access to it, but folks on the farm just didn't have it. So That's how these types of recipes originated. So we like it, and we also eat the regular with oregano, but this is our favorite. So today I'm going to do a double batch of this. Cook it down in this pot till it gets the right consistency for me. Then I'm going to can it. So right now I'm going to prep the veggies, and then we can get going. I've got my pan here. If I was doing a single batch, I would use a smaller Dutch oven, but I want to get this going right away, so I'll mix it all together. That way the final product will be more consistent, one recipe from the other. You're measuring everything, but you just never know. So I've got some olive oil in the pot, coating the bottom. And I've cut up my peppers and onions, and it's basically a large dice, like that. And I'm just going to dump them in here. We have to cook those down a little, being raw. You're basically frying them, softening them up. And while this is happening, I'm going to open the cans. Now, if you happen to have fresh tomatoes and you can work out the equivalent of the 3 28-ounce cans of tomato product, you can certainly use that. Likewise for the sauce, some folks already have their own canned sauce on hand, and you can use that as well. It's just that in their original recipe, they made it this way. And what I like about using the cans is that anytime I want, any time in the year, middle of winter, I can set out and make a batch of this stuff and have it ready. And if you don't like to do the canning and processing, you can also freeze it in freezer bags. Some folks do that. Okay, let me get started on opening those cans. Okay, we've got our onions and peppers softened up, a little bit brown, just the way you like them. Now we're going to add our tomato products. Get them in there. I've included 1 can of diced. I know they're going to cook down, but they'll still leave a little chunk in there. That's my 6 cans, the 6 large cans of tomato. Again, you can use fresh if you have them, or even if you can tomatoes, you could use that. They're nice. So you can see it's chunky. There's a lot of those chunks will go away. But now my tomato sauce. My tomato paste. They don't make it easy getting this out of here. Alright, there's 1 can. 2nd can. This is like thickener, and it gives you a more intense flavor of the tomato. Okay. That's a challenge. We'll get that in there. As that heats up, that'll break it, break up into smoother pieces there. Now my Worcestershire sauce. Putting that in there. That adds a little tang to it. And my spice mix. Putting that in there. Now, I'm going to post the actual recipe for this for a single batch. You notice I'm not really telling you here, how much I put in for the double. You're good at that. You can double it up if you want. But I'll post the single recipe for this right here in the video, and maybe I'll even put it in a link down below so you can you can copy it and try it yourself. So I've got all my product in there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cook this down to let the flavors permeate into the onion and pepper. The tomatoes will break down some and it'll get thick. Now you're probably saying, well, it's pretty thick now, but once it warms up it thins out a little bit and then it'll thicken. So that's the point I want to get to. I get it nice and hot, nice and thick, bring it down to what I want, and then we'll do some canning. Now while all this is cooking, I've got to get all my materials ready for canning. Okay, we're ready to can this. This has been cooking several hours. It's heated all the way through. I did several taste tests, and it's frankly too hot right now to even put in your mouth. And that's what you want. You want that sauce hot when it goes in the jar. Now I've got my jars here. I boiled them. Make sure they're clean. I washed them first and then boiled them so they've been sterilized. That's very important. Kind of obvious, but very important. So I'm going to get a few out here on the cutting board, and then I'm going to start filling them. So before I do, now I'm going to do something that we never used to have to do back when I started canning over 35 years ago. I'm going to put a little citric acid in each jar, and that's to help preserve it. I'm just putting about a half a teaspoon. You don't have to do this, but the tomatoes that typically are growing today aren't as acidic as they used to be. It's just the way things are going in the garden. So you want to make sure that this stuff is preserved well. So you don't want to be opening a jar in the middle of December and getting sick on it. So I put my funnel here in the jar, and then I just start filling. It's real simple. There's a little line on the inside of the funnel, and that tells me how high to go. I just fill them up. Once I get these full and capped, I'm going to put them in a water bath canner. And then I run that canner for like 35 minutes to make sure that the entire jar, outside and inside, has been brought up to a boiling temperature. Then I take them out, cool them off, the lid will pop down, and we'll be done. Now I may have to do 2 batches in the canner because I can only get like 9 jars in there. A bit more there. Alright. Now I've got my lids soaking in hot water here, and that's to soften up that little rubber ring that's inside on it. I always use a new lid. You know, some people reuse lids. No, sorry, I don't do that. I think my health and well-being is more important than skimping on lids. It's just a magnet. I've washed my rings. These you can reuse as long as they're not rusty. If you, you know, when your jar is empty, if you store the ring off the jar, they'll last longer. They won't rust as quick. Difficult. Now I just kind of do finger tight, like snug it. Because it's going to develop a pressure inside that jar, and that will release in the pot. Now I'm going to put these back in the canner and get some more empties. Be very careful with these. You drop a jar in that water, and you got boiling water coming right out at you. Could really ruin your day. Like I said, I'll have 9 jars in this batch, and then I can determine what I have left, and do I want to can it, or do I want to save it in the refrigerator or freeze it. Let me do my citric acid. I want to tell you, the smell of this stuff makes me want to go get some hot sausage and some rolls and make grinders. Typically in the fall and early winter, we watch for the hot sausage to go on sale at the store, and we buy up a bunch of it, and we break it up into quantities that we typically, the 2 of us, would eat, and we freeze it. And then all I have to do, if we're going to do grinders, is pick up some fresh rolls and make sure I have cheese, and away we go. Oh boy. I don't think I've ever been in love with a spaghetti sauce like this. Went a little too heavy on that one. And those onions and peppers are cooked down nice. They're nice and soft. There's still some chunk to them, you can see there. But so it's not just liquid. Okay. I'm wiping the rim. This ensures a good seal. You may not even see the stuff on there, but it's on there, and you want to get that off before you put the lids on. if canning bothers you, or if you just simply don't want to learn it, or you don't want to do the mess and everything, like I said, you can still freeze this. That works. And a lot of people I know do freeze it. I just don't like to have to wait to have it thaw. I want to open that jar and go. I'm putting these back in the canner. Got a couple inches of water over the top of the jar, and that'll make sure that the heat is evenly pushed into that product. Okay, let me show you what it looks like in the jar. There they are, and you can see the water boiling. I'm going to cover it now, and once it comes to a full rolling boil, I'll start the timer for 35 minutes. In the meantime, I'll keep this warm. I've got quite a bit left in there, so I'll finish that off on a second batch in the canner. If I had been doing a single batch recipe, I probably would have it all in here right now, but you know, I want to make sure I don't only have to do this once, and I don't want to be doing it again in the winter. So here we go. Okay, my jars have processed for 35 minutes. I'm going to carefully lift them out of the hot water here. And put them on a rack to cool. You'll probably start hearing the lids pop. Each one will make a little distinctive pop as the vacuum makes a seal inside that jar. If you're canning and you don't happen to have one of these, get one. They're really safe. I used to try to use the little hot dog tongs and stuff. It's really not safe. You don't want to get the jar halfway out, drop it back in, and have water splash on you. Each one of these jars is a meal for us here. So there's 9 to start with. Now I have to heat up my empty jars in here. So I'm going to get those and then carefully put those in. And I'll leave them in there for a short while. So I estimated what I was going to need, and I'm figuring I'm going to need about 4 pints. What I don't know is if the last jar will fill out evenly to a pint. So, not wanting to waste anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a smaller jar in there, which is a half pint, right here. Then I won't waste any. I can do a small half pint and put that on the shelf. I'm going to crank that heat back up and let this sit in there for a short while, just to heat those jars so they're really super hot when I put them back into the canner. Okay, we're ready to rock and roll here. There goes one of my lids popping. jars are nice and hot. I can't stress the cleanliness enough. It just, you gotta be safe. I'll leave the small one in the canner right now. Citric acid. I get this at the grocery store. It's really inexpensive, and it doesn't really change the taste at all. It just makes it a little more acidic, so it cans better. One. It's a little full. These are chunky. That's 2. Three. 4. Now I'm going to use that small one. And 5. Okay. Do the lids again. See, it does pick up some stuff. Now we're going to snug these rings on. You can hear the popping in the background of the lids. Okay, we're going to load these back into the canner and run that another 35 minutes. Now I've lost some water in here through evaporation, so I'm going to throw a little bit more hot water in there and let it come back up to heat. I'm just carefully pouring this. This is hot water right out of the sink. Even though it's not boiling, it will be very shortly. I'll put a lid on this. And I'll keep an eye on it. I got the heat on high. We're going to let this come to a full boil, and then I'll time it for 35 minutes. Okay. Okay, the second batch is out, and there you can see I ended up with 13 pints and 1/2 pint. As I said earlier, there's only 2 of us here, and the pint will fill out enough food for just, like 1 meal for us. If we have company, we can always add another jar. The little 1/2 pint works well if you have leftover pasta or something, and you find that in the fridge, and you need a little sauce, but you don't want to open a whole jar. That works really well for that. Plus, it saves it. Now, I did have a little bit left in a leftover container that ended up in the fridge, but basically that's what a double batch does. So a single batch would probably give you 6 jars, 6.5 maybe. So I encourage you to try the recipe, and you'll see that I have it listed here in the video. But I'm only listing a single batch, and that's easier. And then, if you want to double it, you can do that. If you decide that this isn't to your liking and you want to stick with your own favorite family recipe, I also encourage you to take up canning, because you can do up a big batch of it, put it in jars, cook it one time, and then on those busy nights when you're looking for a quick meal, you just pull the jar off the shelf. It works really well for us, and I'm sure it would work really well for you. So give it a try, check it out, and I really want to thank you very much for watching the video, and I encourage you to subscribe. We have other cooking ideas on here. Most of them are New England based. To subscribe, underneath the video here, there's a little bar that says subscribe. If you click on that, a bell will show up, and click on the bell, and then you'll receive a notification every time that I put out a video. It doesn't mean you have to watch it, but you at least know what's coming out. Okay? And a reminder, when you subscribe, it's absolutely free. It does not cost you anything. This is all a free service. So give it a try. Thanks.